person's youth, ideally, is a time of hope and exploration. But for some young women, it is between the ages of 15 and 24 that they face the greatest risk of HIV. Globally, 2.1 million young women are living with HIV. 4 out of every 5 of these young women live in sub-Saharan Africa. Here, over 25% of all new HIV infections occur in young women. Young men also face the risk of HIV, but their risk is less than half that of young women. While we see a great deal of progress against the HIV epidemic, we are still failing these young women. One factor that increases their HIV risk is transactional sex. We reviewed evidence to answer 3 key questions. What exactly is transactional sex? What are the different motivations that lead young women to engage in transactional sex? And what can we do to reduce their HIV risk from this practice? First of all, what is transactional sex? Here is the definition we recommend. Transactional sex refers to non-commercial, non-marital sexual relationships motivated by the implicit assumption that sex will be exchanged for material benefit or status. Isn't that the same as sex work? Well, no. This is a non-commercial exchange. These are relationships between boyfriends and girlfriends or lovers with the implicit understanding of exchange. Young women engaged in transactional sex do not see themselves as sex workers, and so a program to protect sex workers may not reach them. What determines young women's engagement in transactional sex relationships with men? We suggest that there are at least 3 sets of motivations. The first is to meet basic needs. Gendered poverty pushes young women into this practice, sometimes called survival sex. The second set of motivations is social pressure, together with the aspiration to have a better life. Influenced by marketing and media, young women exchange sex for consumer goods as part of improving their social status. The third set of motivations comes from the assumption that a man must be the provider in a relationship. Young women exchange sex for material symbols of love and commitment. We show these sets of motivations separately, but in most cases, transactional sex is influenced by a combination of these factors. And in all cases, transactional sex is structured by economic and gender inequalities. When we look at economic inequality, we see that transactional sex can take place in very different contexts, ranging from uniform poverty to situations of marked inequalities where middle-class lifestyles are on display. When it comes to gender inequality, most women hold less power and have fewer resources to draw from than men do, in society and in their relationships. This does not mean that women do not have any power in transactional sex relationships. In fact, young women sometimes see themselves as wielding a lot of power and being able to convince men to provide the things they need. But, importantly, young women often lack the power to make decisions about sex. Once we understand why young women exchange sex for benefit, we can think about steps to reduce the HIV risk involved. Here are 5 points to consider. 1. It does not make sense to try to stop all transactional sex. After all, most relationships involve some type of exchange, for example, of gifts. Focus on the risk, not the practice. ensure that young women have access to safe and affordable HIV prevention technologies. 2. In order to be effective, understand the context. Do many young women report that they exchange sex for benefit here? If yes, go on to ask other questions. Is the area very poor, or is there a range in economic levels? How do young women see their own power and agency in transactional relationships? The answers will guide the priorities for programming. 3. Address the HIV risk of transactional sex within broader programs that aim to empower adolescent girls and young women. Transactional sex is structured by women's economic vulnerability and gender inequality. Programs that can address both are likely to be more effective. 4. Do not focus on a single set of motivations. That would only address part of the story. For example, where young women are poor or marginalized, a priority might be access to credit or better ways to earn income. But it is also important for young women to reflect critically on women's power in transactional sex relationships and to recognize and resist the pressure of marketing. 5. Gender norms keep women reliant on men as providers and authority figures. To address these norms effectively, engage all members of society, especially men and boys. These 5 points will help in the design of more effective measures to tackle transactional sex, not only to reduce young women's HIV risk, but also to improve their well-being and lead to brighter futures.